Okay, Kev, do you want to teach us a quick idea? It's because we're behind. Arthur was waiting for you
Yeah,
to.
just yeah, but it's from the parasha, not from. I didn't think the Omer, so I can do that tomorrow. I got to. So in the upcoming parashiot, it discusses people that are inflicted with sarat and different um, things from the various aveirot. And the most common that we know about is called sarat, which is caused by gossip or and lashon hora, evil speech, and the way when for purification purposes, in terms of the purification, um, the when before the person becomes purified, a turtle dove and a dove are taken. Birds are taken, and the blood. One of them is slaughtered, and the blood is used. The other one is set free. And the reason why they use birds, because birds chirp too much. People, they talk idlessly, they chirp idlessly. And this is what, if humans do this, idle chatter can eventually lead to negative speech. That's why birds are used in the purification purposes, in the purification process. So if you chirp, don't chirp with the birds. Okay?
Okay.
What about
So
Twitter?
that's the reason.
There you go. Tweet, tweet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
but it keeps the whole day long. Thank God they changed the name. All right, here.
Yeah.
Right. So
So
who
that's the
refers
story.
Twitter? Twits. Anyway, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's. All right. Let's do a quick. This is one of the longest Mishnahs that I think I found ever. I'm just going to share the screen. Just give me 1 second. Share. Okay. All right, guys. Do you see the
Mm.
Mishnah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite long.
Yeah.
Just gonna go through each
Lovely.
of them quickly. Okay. So where's it found in the Gemara? If you see where my mouse is pointing to, it's in Makkos 5b5 and 5b6. It actually spans 2 pages. That's how big it is. So the following Mishnah contains expositions of the verse that defines the basic law of testimony. The first two expositions have a bearing on the law of Hazama, because the one has to do with standard witnesses and the other ones are conspiring witnesses. But the structure of how you set up the witnesses, whether they're contradictory, conflicting, or plotting, or witnesses that make the grade, the procedures are very, very similar. So it says, by the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall the one who deserves to die be put to death. Now, if you look at Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 6, it actually states, if you look on Safari or the Stone Edition Chumash, Al Pi Shnayim, so it says, a person shall be put to death only on the testimony of 2 or more witnesses. No one shall be put to death on the testimony of a single witness. We're going to discuss monetary cases there. If you don't have 2 witnesses, what's incumbent upon the procedure of making somebody take an oath, at least to defend their position. So the verse sets forth the minimum number of witnesses necessary to establish the fact. And where is the other pasuk that this is mentioned? Well, it's mentioned, if you have a look. Also, I don't know if you remember this, but we covered this in a slightly different exposition. Initially we said it was in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 6. But if you have a look at the laws established by Adam Zomamim, which is chapter 19, verse 19, it goes all the way back to chapter 19, verse 15. And guys, it appears in the section of Zomamim witnesses, about conspiring witnesses. And it says exactly the same thing: by the testimony of 2 witnesses or by the testimony of 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. So it's got the same theme running throughout in terms of consistency. So if testimony may be established by two witnesses and their testimony is sufficient, why did the Chumash also specify that it might be established with three witnesses? Rather, its purpose must be to draw an analogy between 3 and 2. Just as it's obvious that three witnesses can discredit two witnesses through hazamah. Why? Because as the Mishnah says, it's common sense that three should have more credibility than two. Okay? So two witnesses can discredit three through hazamah. So what do we mean by that exactly? We're saying, look, when you're looking at standard testimony, three witnesses generally has more credibility than two. But with this rule of saying that the second set of witnesses are believed if they testify that the first set were with them in a different location, the second set is believed. Obviously, they have to go through a certain witness process, which means it's the order in which they appear, not the number of witnesses that appear. So again, conspiring witnesses, it's the second set that's believed to discredit the first set. If it's a case of discrediting their testimony and the two are conflictory, we investigate, and if we can't come to a resolution, the case is dismissed. The second set is believed. Obviously, they need to corroborate it. They can't just say that the first set were with them. I'm sure there's a rigorous process. So again, when it comes to hazamah, saying that they weren't at that location, the second set is believed. So even if the first set has three, but the second set has two, the order in which they appear in terms of time sequence of coming afterwards to say the first set couldn't have been there to witness, they believed. But generally a case when they're not accusing them of being in a different location, but merely saying that their testimony is not correct because they viewed the event in a different way, then the second set are not necessarily believed. Both the sets have equal status, and in fact, three can discredit two, but at the very least cast doubt to where the case can be dismissed or thrown out of court if they both contradict each other. So we just got to see how this plays out, because remember, Adam Zomamim is about discrediting the integrity of the first set who couldn't have been there to witness the event, not about the facts of the case. So let's just go. Guys, can you see where my mouse is moving at the moment?
Yeah.
It says the Torah teaches us by this analogy to disregard the numerical superiority of the first set and judge the Zomamim by the testimony of the two later witnesses. So as you can follow by this Mishnah, is it's a timeline of the two later witnesses that are believed, not the numerical superiority of the first set that might happen to have three witnesses. From where in Chumash do we know that this holds true even for 100? That if even 100 witnesses testify to something and two other witnesses then testify that they saw all 100 of them somewhere else at the very time, the testimony of the two witnesses is established, all 100 is Zomamim. Now, you know that not every opinion believes in that. Do you remember that discussion? There is the opinion of Rav Yehuda that turns around and says it can't be. All of a sudden, we believe the second set, and every time there's a new set to testify against the defendant, they were with us, they were with us, they were with us. Something's amiss. The rabbis say it can be established that that's the case. Let me give you a particular example. At a wedding, if they had a common event, it has more plausibility. But according to Rav Yehuda, it's not necessarily believed at all. According to the Rebbeim, what we say is that it can be believed, but you've got to bear in mind that there's two ways that the 100 witnesses can be equated. It could be a single set of 100, or maybe 50 groups of two. In other words, what we are saying is this process can ratify itself more than once. Doesn't have to be 100. I think that's a bit of a hyperbole, but it's saying that it is possible that more than one set are not joined, particularly if you remember, if they view it from a different vantage point, and the one set of witnesses cannot see the other. We went through that. So they're looking in the center, and one set is on the left, east wing, and the other's on the right, west wing, and they don't see each other. They're seen as two separate sets of witnesses. If they can see each other, then they're deemed as one set. Okay? So the Torah therefore states in the verse cited above this plurality of the word witnesses. So what's the big deal here? So I'm just going to go through what this actually means. Is that basically the verse states by the testimony of two witnesses or three witnesses. What you could have said, the Torah, Brendan, wastes no words. It's a concept we learn that every word is precious and they don't just wax lyrical. It's not a Shakespeare play. So instead of saying by the testimony of two witnesses or three witnesses, it's using the word witness twice, because you could say by the testimony of two or three witnesses. Why is it mentioning by the testimony of two witnesses and in the pasuk say all three witnesses? It was superfluous to mention the word witnesses again. So the repetition of the word witnesses teaches that all groups of witnesses, whatever their number, are treated as equals. And that's the bottom line, is that they're actually seen as equals in terms of grouping, and you can't be daunted by their size. It has to do with the sequence with regards to Adam Zomimim, and more than one set of witnesses can occur, and you might have a group that's slightly bigger than another group. It doesn't mean they automatically believe. Now we're going to have three different opinions. The first one is Rabbi Shimon, who says that more conclusions can be drawn from this analogy of 2 verses 3. Just as two witnesses are not executed unless both are established as zomimim, so too three witnesses are not executed unless all three are established as zomimim. Okay, so I'll tell you what we're saying there. Well, we're obviously saying that as the Mishnah continues, if only two of the three are rendered zomimim, the testimony of the entire set is discredited. So in other words, but they're not punished. The court can throw out the case if only two of the three are rendered conspiring witnesses, and the testimony of the entire set is discredited, but they're not punished. Generally, we did learn a principle, and that was that you can't just punish one Adam Zomimim. But we've also going to learn something further, that if you've got an entire cluster and there's one, and one is held to be a zomimim, they can't all be punished. The case is dismissed, and it affects the credibility of all of them. So the case is thrown out of court. So it says, from where in Scripture do we know that this holds true even for 100? That is, if 100 witnesses testified to something, all 100 of the witnesses must be discredited through hazamah before any of them can be punished. The Torah therefore states this pluralization of the word witnesses. So what's that principle meaning? That all 100 must be discredited in order that they get the reciprocal punishment of the death penalty, or the reciprocal punishment. If one of them is not, the case can be discredited, but they're not punished. That's according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Akiva said the third witness is not mentioned so that we should deal more leniently, rather that we should deal more stringently with him. And we're going to make this third witness sentence the same as theirs. So what are we trying to say here is that generally if you've got three witnesses and the one witness is found to be an Adam Zomimim, you could generally say that, hang on a sec, you can generally say that the third witness need not be punished. Why? Why, guys? Why do you think that's the case?
Well, none of them should be punished then, because the third witness, as opposed to they discredited. If one's discredited, discredited from being a valid witness?
So let me put the question clearer.
The whole thing's chucked out. All three of them.
Okay, so let me put this clearer. You would say that the third witness, just hang on. Pam, can you close the door? I'm trying to give a share and there's banging. Guys, what I'm saying to you is that the third witness shouldn't be punished. Why? Because the testimony given of the first two would convict the accused. You don't need a third witness. So because the third witness joins, Rabbi Akiva is saying immediately you should think there should be a leniency against the third witness because his testimony doesn't seal the deal. You see that. So the Mishnah is actually saying the reason why Rabbi Akiva is mentioning that is because he wants this third witness to be dealt with just as stringently as the other two, even though you don't need the third one to seal the deal against the defendant if they weren't caught out as Adam Zommerman. Does that make sense, guys? Why Rabbi Akiva is mentioning this specifically?
This is on the first set of witnesses.
No. The first set, yes, on the first set of witnesses. If the first set of witnesses are three, and a second set could prove they were with them in another location, that could prove they were in another location, then the third witness shouldn't be punished, technically. Why? Because you can convict based on the testimony of two witnesses. You don't need the third's testimony. It's redundant. So therefore, we would think that we should deal more leniently with him. Why? Because he doesn't affect the case in any way. Can you see that, guys? Guys, it's
Yeah,
not.
but he's definitely conspiring with the other two. That's why he's punished.
Yeah,
in my
but in
opinion.
practicality, Gavin, one would think because we're trying to get the defendant off, and we also don't want to kill Adam Zommerman if possible. If possible, we don't want to kill anybody.
Yeah.
So the redundancy of the third person not needing to do a checkmate as the second witness, and he's actually a spare wheel, you would have ruled a leniency. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, there's no leniency. If he joins, exactly as Gavin suggested, the other two, he should suffer the consequences. And they should all be punished as Zommerman. Okay, so, and how does Scripture punish? It says, if one was merely an accomplice to transgressors, treating him like the transgressors themselves, you can see the same analogy from Rabbi Akiva that if two people are doing a mitzvah and the third one joins, he's entitled to share the mitzvah same as them. So there's a point, it works both ways. It doesn't just work the negative way. But it does emphasize the fact that although the third witness's testimony was not needed, he nevertheless shares their punishment if they're all found to be Zommerman. Does that make sense, guys? It's
Yeah.
straightforward. All right. And just as two witnesses, if one of them was found to become a relative to one of the parties to the dispute, or disqualified to serve as a witness, he was disqualified to testify because of his profession or because of the sins he committed. So let me just go through a couple of things. Now, relatives to one of the parties, either the defendant or the plaintiff, you cannot testify. Now, what's interestingly enough is that you would think that the reason is that you would come as a relative to the aid of the relative. Do you not think that that would normally be the case?
Yeah.
Okay, so here the Gemara says some interesting commentary. It says sometimes family hates each other. And the things you've got to worry about is your own family testifying against you. So in other words, it's not just in your defense, it's in your accusation. That because of that relationship, they cannot testify. Does that make sense?
Never thought of it that way. That's quite good.
Well, it depends how healthy your family is.
Yeah.
But most people have got some uncle in the woodwork that they did a dirty 10 years ago to them by maybe not inviting them to a Shabbos lunch, and that uncle's never forgot it. Who knows?
People aren't a new thing.
No, they're not. And even on a serious note, when they're planning weddings, there's always machlokas afterwards. We weren't at the main table. Why did you want me to sit next to Auntie Sadie? You know, she hates my relatives from 5 generations back. So a relative can be disqualified on the basis that they for one of the protagonists or against one of the protagonists. It doesn't mean that they're always for them. What is a
What
disqualified
is,
witness because of the career? If somebody is a professional gambler, why that discredited? Because he probably has got odds on the outcome. One of the odds is if he owes money to the defendant and that defendant is executed, but he owes him 300,000 or 400,000 rand, it's very easy to get him knocked off. He doesn't have to pay the debt. Or it could
Mm.
be that he wants to get him off the hook because he's one of the best cricket players in South Africa. Who knows? And he's going to make money off him down the line. So you just suddenly throw a match or a boxing match and suddenly you go off in the third round when you get gently tapped on the cheek. So, so the career makes a difference. Also, if a person's an habitual sinner, you can't trust their testimony. Did any of you have a question before we go on?
Yeah, I did. Just matter of curiosity, what if a family member is the only one that can testify to your innocence, and now they're not allowed to testify?
They can't. They can't testify because obviously mommy doesn't want to see her son getting a capital case. There's a prejudice, either for or against. So they can't. So the question arises is what happens in the case of a divorce? Because in a divorce in Gittin, there have to be witnesses to testify to the divorce, and most of the time they're related. So how does that happen? And one of the cases is that witnesses are relegated beforehand in terms of the Kedushin, as well as the Gittin as an exceptional case. And so it's a good question. All right, let's get back to the Mishnah. So, relative or disqualified witness. So there are two qualified witnesses left to establish the testimony. Their testimony is invalid. Okay, let's just read this again. Okay, this short point. And just as with two witnesses, if one of them was found to be a relative to one of the parties to the dispute, or has been disqualified to serve as a witness because of his profession or because of the sins he's committed, their testimony is nevertheless invalid, since one qualified witness remains. And you would think, okay, so that's in a case where there are two witnesses. What about with two? So if one of them was found to be a relative or a disqualified witness, this has nothing to do only with Adim Zumamim, guys. This has to do with any sets of witnesses. If there was a case where they did view a murder and there were three witnesses and one of them was a relative or disqualified, and there are two qualified witnesses left to establish the testimony is invalid. Okay? The testimony of the two qualified witnesses is disqualified by the invalidation of the third member of the group. So where do we know in Scripture this is true even of 100 witnesses? If there were 100 witnesses in the group and one was disqualified, the testimony of the remaining 99 is also invalidated. The Torah therefore uses this plural of word witnesses. So this is not only a case of Einem Zomamim. We don't want the defendant to get killed. So that's one of the issues that are brought into play. Obviously, the rules can apply to Adam Zomamim as well. Rav Yossi's got a different opinion. So we already dealt with Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon, and now Rav Yossi. So Rav Yossi said, regarding what is this said, that even if one of the three or more witnesses is disqualified, the testimony of the entire group is invalidated. According to Rav Yossi, it's only regarding capital cases, but in regard to monetary cases, the disqualification of one of the witnesses does not invalidate the testimony of the rest of the witnesses. Rather, the testimony is established by the remaining witnesses who have not been disqualified. Why is it, do you think that is, guys?
because you're not trying to get monetary cases off. In murder cases, you're looking for any excuse to get somebody off. And in
Perfect.
monetary cases, what's that?
Perfect. So Gavin's right. We show
Okay, copy.
in monetary cases, if there are two valid witnesses left, we want monetary cases to be just and fair. The third witness isn't to disqualify according to Rav Yossi. But as far as the capital cases is concerned, we don't want the defendant to die. So we use this based on a technicality. Gavin's completely correct according to Rav Yossi. Rabbi says whether in monetary cases or capital cases, the disqualification of a single witness invalidates the testimony of the entire group. Okay? But under what circumstance? But when? Only if the witnesses warned them immediately prior to the crime. So this is one of the points that I have to give you, is that at the end of the day, if you have a look at this, the only time you need a warning is when?
When there's a death involved.
Correct. When there's a death sentence. For monetary cases, you don't need a warning. So this doesn't seem to make sense when you look at it on the surface. Because if there was no warning, it would seem to be a problem. But Rabbi, he seems to be more stringent. He said, look, even in a capital case, if there are three sets of witnesses and the single witness invalidates the entire group, only if the witnesses warned them immediately prior to the crime. By joining in the warning, the disqualified witness demonstrates that he is not merely a spectator, but a participating witness. His disqualification therefore invalidates the testimony of all the witnesses at all. But if he did not warn them, the disqualified witness did not participate in the actual warning, guys. He is not automatically considered part of the witness group, and his disqualification does not invalidate the testimony of the entire group. And what does this mean? It means that he's more stringent. So, Gavin, if one of them wasn't involved with the warning process or wasn't set to join the group, the other two can give the death penalty to the murderer. Because the minute he testifies, so the minute he gives Hazroa a warning, he forms part of the qualified witnesses. By not issuing the warning, there is a disqualification of that person as a witness in any event. Because you don't know if he just aims to be a valid, merely a spectator or a participating witness. So in order to be a witness, he has to join in the warning itself. So you can see Rebbe is more stringent than Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi is saying capital case, it disqualifies the entire group, but not in monetary cases. And as far as Rabbi is saying is that there is no warning. So what does this mean in terms of monetary case when there's no warning? The Gemara is going to go through and say, look, they asked this witness in the case of a monetary case, were you going to be a spectator or do you wish to actually participate as a witness? Whereas in the capital case, it's more stringent, Gavin. He actually has to be involved with the warning process. Do you get what I'm saying? So it says this must be so. Otherwise, what should we do with two brothers who saw someone commit a murder? So what's this issue of two brothers? Let me just finish. Two brothers may not bear witness together. So if they're two witnesses and they happen to be brothers and both issued a warning, one brother can't testify with another brother. So you can't have two relatives that testify together either. They don't only have to be related to the prosecution or the defendant. They can't be related to each other. So what would happen is that one would issue a warning and one would not, and then one would not appear in the court, the one that didn't issue a warning. But if no distinction is drawn on the basis of a warning, a murderer who killed in the presence of two brothers would go free no matter how many other witnesses there were. Because if the one brother is disqualified because he's related to the other brother, we're saying if one witness then becomes invalid, the entire remaining witnesses in a capital case invalidates. However, according to Rabbi, as long as one of the brothers did not participate in the warning, the testimony of the other witnesses remain valid. So just one thing I want to go through is obviously one of the other contingencies is that brother should not testify in court. But Rava's principle isn't relevant in that particular case, because one of the things we've got to bear in mind is that even if well, let me put it this way, is that abstaining from a court isn't really sufficient. It would be sufficient if one of the brothers abstains from the warning. So according to that, what happens if both of the brothers did warn? How could they not know? They'd recognize each other's voices. So generally, even if they couldn't see each other, their voice recognition would be there. All right, so I think we've just done the Mishnah this session. We don't have to go through the whole Gemara. Any questions?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. It seems like that there should be another two witnesses witnessing the fact that a warning was in fact given.
You're
Because
not
that's
going to
gonna-
always have
That'll
the
be
luxury.
No, sorry, to give me 1 second. That'll be my argument. I'd say, all right, I wasn't issued a warning by the witnesses.
I hear you.
And it's my word against the witnesses. I'm just saying, I don't know.
So Gavin's got a good point. How do we believe the witnesses? Is it's 2 against 1? So what we're saying is, at first we said numbers don't count, and now we're saying numbers count. So generally numbers count, and the fact that 2 against 1, the majority does rule. However, there have to be the 2 witnesses are questioned separately, Gavin, for every factor of detail. So they try and trip
make
up
sure-
those witnesses.
Yeah, to try and make sure that the warning was in fact given, because that's the problem.
But-
Because it's a big problem. The warning wasn't actually issued by the witnesses. Then the guy shouldn't be put to death. That's the problem.
And also the right warning has to be given according to certain opinions. I think it could be Rav Yochanan. I'll just double check that it's not only
Damon,
going to be a death penalty, but it has to be the right death penalty given. Yeah.
in biblical times, did they not make a written note of a warning or a written record? Because most people usually are honest. How do they know that these guys were talking the truth? If a written record of the warning existed, then that is a watertight proof that it was given.
Okay, let me address Kevin's point. So firstly, on the spur of the moment, when Shimon is about to kill Levi, and Reuven and Yehuda are both saying, no, please don't kill him. This will be the death penalty. Nobody can prepare a written warning before that. What they can do is prepare a statement when they cross-testify the witnesses before it's actually admitted into a homicide case, that their testimony doesn't contradict each other. Whether that's done before the actual court case or during the court case, separating the witnesses and getting accuracy in terms of the facts is a prerequisite. Warning is not enough. They want to check what they viewed. They even go as far as saying, the tree behind you, was it a fern or was it this? What leaves did it have? So they go into immense detail as far as that's concerned. In terms of, is there a court stenographer writing down what happened? Yes, that's why testimony cannot be cancelled because of intimidation. Because if somebody can retract their testimony, they might have 5 heavy bouncers arrive at the person's door if they're testifying against a mafia boss, and then they want to retract testimony. So the court says you can't retract. And on that basis of their non-retraction, are they later executed if they were found to be conspiring witnesses. So court stenography was a thing even then, but at the time you can't say hear ye before you kill this person. I just need to have a document and you need to sign the warning. Just compose yourself while you're going to kill him and just sign the document that you acknowledge. There's also another problem is that the murderer has to say he acknowledges both the punishment and the consequence. And very few people are going to do that. So we're saying, does the person get off? No, they get the Bavli treatment. Yeah, Lance?
So the flaw in the system is that if I know my brother killed somebody, but I didn't see it, I can then become a witness and say I saw him do it to get him off the hook because I'm his brother.
Okay, but then they won't admit you as a witness to start with. In other words, one of the reasons why they won't admit you as a witness to start with is because you're a relative. So they don't invalidate on that basis. You're not even admitted as a witness. Sometimes
but
it's
So why do they? But you just mentioned that if you're relatives, say if you are a cousin, I don't know. You just mentioned if someone's a cousin or relative, that it gets thrown out.
so
But now
that
you're saying that you get questioned before, so it gets thrown out before the case actually happens.
so
So what is it?
Lance has got a good point. Do they disqualify the witness? So the thing of it is, uh, uh, if if um, if the defendant is there, none of the families can testify against or on their behalf. They're not even admitted as a witness. When two brothers witness a third party that they're not related to, but the two of them happen to be witnesses, that's where the issue comes in about then every murderer will go free because the two witnesses, two brothers cannot bear witness together against a third party, and therefore the one becomes invalidated automatically and then disqualifies everybody else because they were both giving almost hazra, which is a warning against the killer. So the two were not related. Sorry, they were not related to the killer. The two brothers are related as witnesses.